Exodus chapter 12, verse 21 through 36. Then Moses called all the elders of Israel and said to them, Go and select lambs for yourselves according to your clans, and kill the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and touch the lintel and the two doorposts with the blood that is in the basin. None of you shall go out of the door of his house until the morning. For the Lord will pass through to strike the Egyptians, and when he sees the blood on the lintel and on the two doorposts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not allow the destroyer to enter your houses to strike you. You shall observe this rite as a statute for you and your sons forever. And when you come to the land that the Lord will give you, as he has promised, you shall keep this service. And when your children say to you, What do you mean by this service? You shall say, It is a sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, for he passed over the house of the people of Israel in Egypt, when he struck down the Egyptians but spared our houses. And the people bowed their heads and worshipped. Then the people of Israel went and did so, as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. At midnight the Lord struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians. And there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. Then he summoned Moses and Aaron by night and said, Up, go out from among my people, both you and the people of Israel, and go, serve the Lord as you have said. Take your flocks and your herds as you have said, and be gone and bless me also. The Egyptians were urgent with the people to send them out of the land in haste, for they said, We shall all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, their netting bowls being bound up and their cloaks on their shoulders. The people of Israel had also done as Moses told them, for they had asked the Egyptians for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they let them have what they asked. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. Today's passage finally sees God's promise of salvation fulfilled. As the Israelites put the blood of the lamb on the doorposts, the final plague passes them by while it strikes all of Egypt. Pharaoh finally relents and tells the Israelites to leave at once. Just as God promised, the Egyptian neighbors give Israel much silver and gold as they leave the land. God's timing is different from ours. Even though Israelites would have liked to be saved earlier, God was waiting for the moment where it would show all of Israel and to the world the saving power of God. And this was all done to foreshadow the salvation that we receive through Christ. God's timing also occurs in a moment, and we ought to be prepared for his guidance. Although Israelites were anticipating for God's promise to be fulfilled, once the moment came, they needed to hurry and get ready to leave. When God gives us a time to remain silent and wait for God to work in our lives, it is our time to prepare and trust in the Lord until God begins to move in our lives. We always need to remind ourselves that just as God saved Israel from the hands of Pharaoh, God will always fulfill his promises in our lives. Joshua 21:45 says, Not one word of all the good promises that the Lord had made to the house of Israel had failed. All came to pass. Are we waiting for God's promises to be fulfilled in our lives? As we meditate on today's passage, let us find confidence once again in knowing that God has always fulfilled his promises, and he always will.